What's up, guys? It is RGT85, and obviously by the title of this video we have a lot of stuff to talk about, and those two topics aren't the only topics we're going to cover because there's some breaking news happening this morning regarding a very popular retro gaming franchise. So if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, be sure to like the video, turn on notifications, all that stupid YouTube crap. But without any further ado, let's get into what's going on in the world of video games, because right now it looks like a popular franchise that many people have wanted to come back could be potentially coming back, and the franchise in question is Silent Hill. Now, of course, Silent Hill started out with a bang, kind of ended with a whimper. Some of the later titles in the franchise just weren't quite up to snuff, but people enjoyed the Silent Hill franchise, and I'm one of those people. I have very fond memories of playing games like Silent Hill 4, The Room, the original Silent Hill, just really weird, sort of twisted horror games that did something a bit different in terms of storytelling than other games at the time, such as Resident Evil. Well, for a long time, there's been rumors of a Silent Hill resurgence, and we haven't really seen anything come to fruition when it comes to those rumors. Supposedly it was supposed to be at the Game Awards, potentially at E3. Of course, all these events came and went and nothing happened. But today something very big happened, and that involves Konami and Blooper Team announcing a new strategic partnership deal. And as part of this agreement, the partners declared cooperation in the development of content and the exchange of know-how. So to me, it sounds like Konami is giving Blooper Team one of their franchises to work on. And if you look at Blooper Team's history, of course, they do some horror games. That's really what they're known for when it comes to the world of video games. We have games like the Layers of Fear games, we have the Blair Witch Project, we have the Medium, which recently released earlier this year. Obviously, all of these games had a horror theme. Blair Witch and the Layers of Fear games are essentially modern horror games. But there is something that is sort of raising some eyebrows with both Silent Hill fans and just gamers in general when it comes to Blooper Team. And I'm not here to sort of bash Blooper Team or anything like that, but when you look at their games, especially their horror games, there's sort of one motif that goes along with all of these games. There's no real combat in these games. Essentially, they're sort of the walking horror simulator games where you walk around, stuff scares you, you might have to run away from something, there's interaction with things in the environment, but as far as an actual combat system where you're constantly fighting against different enemies, none of these games really feature any of that. And of course, when you look at the Silent Hill games, well, they're kind of based on combat. The only game in the Silent Hill franchise that wasn't based on combat was Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which of course released on the PlayStation 2, the PSP, and the Nintendo Wii, and was essentially a retelling of the first game, just with a sort of different perspective. And it was a game that I felt really worked at the time. It's actually one of my favorite Silent Hill games of all time because I just love how different it was from other games. But now it's very commonplace. That game released quite a while ago, over a decade ago, when these sort of first-person perspective walking simulators that were based on horror games weren't really a main thing. They weren't really a main genre. And now so many horror games come out where they're essentially just walking games. And I know people out there like them. There are some that really hit with me, games like the Outlast games and whatnot, but I miss when horror games actually had combat in them. So I'm not saying that Blooper Team can't necessarily implement a proper combat system in order to make a Silent Hill game. It's just that their track record doesn't really lead to a bunch of confidence when it comes to things like that. But I think it will be very interesting to see what ends up happening with this partnership. Why Konami has waited so long to enter into a partnership with another company to do their games and work on their IPs just absolutely blows me away. I mean, Konami has so many classic franchises. Of course, we talked yesterday about how Contra got a new mobile game. It's like, we don't want mobile games. We don't want pachinko machines. We want actual video games from you, Konami. And if you have to outsource these games to another company in order to have them made and created, that's fine. Nobody will care as long as the games end up coming out good. So I'm very curious to see what ends up happening with this Konami and Blooper Team sort of partnership that they have now entered. There is a press release over on the Blooper Team website. I'll have a link to it in the description box down below should you want to read it. But obviously there's lots of Silent Hill ramifications from this. Allegedly, one of the IPs that Blooper Team told Konami they wanted was Silent Hill. So it'll be very interesting to see what ends up happening with this. I hope Blooper Team does the Silent Hill franchise justice, because there's a lot of diehard Silent Hill fans out there that have been waiting for a new game or sort of a remake or a remaster of a game. And if it disappoints, well, it could get very ugly. Next up, we have some Nintendo stuff to talk about, obviously by the title of this video. Why didn't you put Silent Hill in the title of the video, RGT? Well, I mean, there's not enough room to put it, and I felt like these two stories were a bit bigger as far as what my fan base is interested in, because you guys like Nintendo information. So Nintendo had their 81st annual general meeting of the shareholders yesterday, and for some reason I was not invited to this meeting. I am a Nintendo shareholder. I own Nintendo stock. It's on my Robinhood profile. Like, what's the problem here, Nintendo? You should be flying me in for these events so that I can ask the real questions, because a lot of these questions make absolutely no sense and they just suck, and you know, it's about stupid stuff that has nothing to do with actual video games when people want to know about actual video game related stuff. But obviously, judging by the title, yes, we're gonna talk about Switch revision. We're gonna talk about Switch Pro. I made such a big deal yesterday about how I was proud of myself, how we haven't talked about this stuff in a while, ever since E3 happened, because nothing came when it came to the Nintendo Switch revision system that was supposed to be announced before the event. But now this is coming from Nintendo themselves. Somebody actually got some cojones. Somebody actually got some balls and asked Nintendo and President Furukawa of Nintendo a question about this Nintendo Switch revision, to which President Furukawa actually responded to it. The announcement of Splatoon 3 was good, and I was relieved that the Switch could still be played next year. There was news of the new Switch, and there was no announcement at E3, and the stock price dropped significantly. Is there anything I can do when rumors come out? Will there be a new Nintendo Switch, in fact? So obviously this is a great question. This person wants to know what they can do for their Nintendo. Ask not what their Nintendo can do for you, ask what you can do for your Nintendo. And they seem very happy that their Nintendo Switch won't explode next year, because they'll still be able to play it with games like Splatoon 3. Well, President Furukawa said the following: "We publish information at the right time. I will refrain from talking about the new model. However, we will continue to pursue play in the future, so we will announce it when the time comes." Now, I do want to mention that all of this information is being translated, so it is sort of a rough translation, and obviously words can sort of be minced and mixed up when it comes to these translation things. All of this information is accurate, it's just not the officially Nintendo translated stuff that they release on their website. We're talking about it a little bit early, but there's one thing that's obviously sticking out like a sore thumb for a lot of people with President Furukawa's response to this, and that is, "I will refrain from talking about the new model." So some people think that they are confirming essentially this new Nintendo Switch model that we were supposed to learn about before E3. Obviously, this person even mentioned how there was no new Switch revision at E3. Stocks are dropping. So maybe that's why President Furukawa sort of answered it like he answered it. He obviously did not shut the door on this completely and say, "We have no new hardware to announce at this time. Thank you for following us," or "Thank you for being a shareholder," or anything. But I almost think that since this is at a shareholders meeting, you want to keep these shareholders happy. Obviously, these people that are at the shareholders meeting probably own a little bit more stock in Nintendo than I do. So you want to keep these people happy, because you don't want the stock to go down, because, I mean, stocks kind of make the world work. I really don't know how the hell it works. I just sort of throw money at it and hope it sticks. So a lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, Nintendo now confirmed the new Nintendo Switch model." And it's just kind of like, I mean, maybe, like, it's just, there's so much murkiness with this whole situation, and every day that goes by where there's not an announcement about this system, I lose faith in it more and more, because it's just like, at what point are we gonna say, okay, well, you know, this isn't a revision, it's a brand new system? I mean, the Nintendo Switch is gearing up on its 5th year. Do you really want to introduce a revision after 5 years of the system on the market, or wouldn't you rather spend your research and development in the next iteration of the system that obviously would probably be backwards compatible with the system or something like that? But I don't know. And of course, there's so much stuff that we've talked about, the 7-inch OLED screen, the alleged 4K stuff. I've been making bets with people behind the scenes about this Nintendo Switch Pro. I'm trying to get someone to confirm that it will be announced and released in 2021, and then I will do a ridiculous bet, much like I'm doing with Balan Wonderworld and Metroid Dread, but no one's really willing to take me up on that. So I don't know, man. It's obviously something worth mentioning. It's obviously something worth talking about, because yes, they didn't essentially close the door on it. Yes, they said something about a new model, but does that actually mean that a new model is happening and that it's going to be a Switch Pro or a Switch revision, or does it mean it's going to be a brand new system, a successor to the Nintendo Switch? I guess time will tell if we even see anything from this. But the other story was actually kind of more interesting, and that's why I'm talking about it last, because it involves Nintendo and their classic games. And obviously a lot of us grew up playing classic Nintendo stuff, and one of the questions I was asked about this was actually very interesting. So I want to go over this question. What will you do to appeal to the patent generation to expand your audience IP? The NES Mini was very good. Are there any plans to expand the Nintendo Switch Online service beyond the NES and Super NES? To which President Furukawa said the following. I will refrain from giving specifics, but we've been making games for 35 years for many generations, and your valuable feedback on the mini-series is appreciated. Now, I think that's kind of interesting because he kind of just completely sidestepped the Nintendo Switch Online stuff and instead sort of talked about the mini stuff. And obviously, when you look at the mini systems, the NES Mini and the SNES Mini were very popular for Nintendo. These sold very, very well. They sold millions and millions of systems. And most people thought that, logically speaking, a Nintendo 64 Mini would be the potential next thing that we saw on the market, but of course that never ended up happening for whatever reason. So I'm sitting here looking at this answer and I'm like, I really don't feel like Nintendo cares to put the Nintendo 64 on the Nintendo Switch Online service. They don't really care about putting more games on there when it comes to actual good games for the systems that are already on there. And as far as systems are concerned, like maybe we'll see like a Game Boy Advance sort of thing, but for whatever reason Nintendo doesn't seem keen on putting the N64 on there. So I got to thinking to myself, well, could this mean something about an N64 Mini? And the more I thought about it, the more it kind of made sense. So follow me on this, where this is some tinfoil hat shit here. So, you know, if you don't like me speculating on stuff, just go ahead and like the video and turn it off because we're getting into some speculation here. Now, first, the N64, of course, released in 1996, meaning that in 2021, it's celebrating its 25th anniversary. I mean, no big deal. Obviously, I think this would be something you might want to celebrate, as the N64 was very impactful when it comes to things like 3D platformers and just video games in general. Some of the best video games of all time. Super Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, of course, released on the N64. It sort of modernized first-person shooters on the home consoles, which was something that we hadn't really seen done very well up until that point. But 25-year anniversary celebration, not a big deal. But then I thought about something else. Of course, last year we had the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection that was released, and we learned that Super Mario 64 was running on an N64 emulator. Oatmeal Dome sort of data mined this information. We talked about it last September when this information was found, but there was something very interesting that was actually found in that data for the N64 emulator that was being used for Super Mario 64. There were remnants of other games in that data. There was remnants of games like Perfect Dark that was in the data for the N64 emulator, and of course these games never came to the Nintendo Switch. So a lot of people were wondering, well, why is this data in there in the first place? Some people thought it was leftover information from the Wii U Virtual Console, but what if it wasn't? What if this was information that they're using for the N64 emulator for the N64 Mini that they plan on potentially releasing this year? Like, it would make sense that we'd have these data files in there for this N64 emulator. Like, why would you use this N64 emulator that has information for other games within it and then just be sort of one and done with it? Wouldn't you want to get the most mileage out of this emulator that you potentially could? I mean, I would. And when you look at the games that were on there, games like Perfect Dark are on there, and you might be saying, well, RGT, that's a Rare game. Microsoft owns it. Hey, newsflash, Microsoft doesn't give a shit where you play their games. They've pretty much made that pretty clear. So I'm sure if Nintendo said, hey, can we use some Rare games for our N64 Mini to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Nintendo 64, and we'll give you a little bit of money for using them, I'm sure Rare would be like, hey, great, go right ahead. Use Banjo, use Jet Force Gemini, use Perfect Dark. Go right ahead, please, 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 because that is bringing brand awareness to Xbox properties. And of course, there is a new Perfect Dark game coming out. You might be saying to yourself, well, why didn't you mention Conquer? Well, Conquer's an M-rated game. I don't really see it being on this potential N64 Mini. And like I said, this is very tinfoil hat stuff. This is just me speculating on it. But I do think it is kind of interesting that President Furukawa completely sidestepped the Nintendo Switch Online question, instead sort of addressing it as a mini thing. When you look at President Furukawa, he obviously likes the business side of things. He was not president during the other mini systems that we got from Nintendo, so maybe he wants to bring the mini systems back. I don't know. Like I said, tinfoil hat stuff here, but there is some interesting coincidences, I guess you could say. Alrighty, so that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to let me know what you think of everything in the comments section down below. Am I an idiot and I'm looking way too far into this N64 thing? Because I probably am. The Nintendo Switch revision question. What do you think of it? Are you happy that this person who asked the question can play their Nintendo Switch next year? And of course, Konami and Blooper Team. Are they going to do Silent Hill justice? Let me know what you think of everything in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, check out other videos on the channel. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.